For the F-35 Lightning, an era of dominance is ending almost as soon as it began. After about a decade in operation, the world's most prolific stealth fighter flies about 1,200 copies worldwide, with plans to ensure that well over 3,000 of the jets will one day fill the air forces of America and its allies. The F-35 vastly outnumbers China's formidable J-20, it's entirely superior to Russia's Su-57, and it's practically guaranteed a service life that will outlast America's own F-22 by decades. But as the world's fascination with fifth-generation fighters morphs into an even higher ambition to begin Generation 6, the F-35 and its creators are realizing that they've got some major problems ahead of them. Lockheed Martin will not be part of America's effort to build a sixth-generation fighter jet, and when the world starts to move beyond what the F-35 offers, one of the world's most powerful aerospace corporations could become irrelevant. But what if the best path forward for American aviation didn't come by way of some hyper-advanced new jet? What if America's allies across the world already had the tools to fight and win an air war deep into the 21st century? And what if Lockheed Martin could convince the air forces of the world that the F-35 could grow into something greater than what anybody thought possible? If Lockheed Martin has its way, then the F-35 of today is going to pale in comparison to the F-35 of the future. And, well, here's the plan to build it. Trouble at Lockheed. In 2025, the F-35 Lightning is the linchpin of America's combat air wing. Currently in service with America's Air Force, its Marine Corps, and its Navy, it's matured into a trusted, dependable, high-capability platform. Just as important, the F-35 has been exported all across the globe, either currently in service or expected to eventually enter service in nations all across Europe, the Indo-Pacific, and the Middle East. It's been deployed in operations against the Taliban, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, and extensively by Israel in its operations against Hamas, Hezbollah, and even Iran. Now, before we can discuss what an upgraded F-35 is capable of, we first got to understand what the modern F-35 is already capable of. A single-engine, single-seat fighter jet, the F-35 is most commonly procured in the A variant, a land-based, conventional takeoff and landing version that serves as the aircraft's default. Coming in a length of tip to tail, 51.5 feet or 15.7 meters with a wingspan of 35 feet or 10.7 meters, the F-35A is able to hit speeds of Mach 1.6 at altitude, that's 1,200 miles per hour or nearly 2,000 kilometers per hour. The F-35A can carry up to 18,000 pounds or over 8,000 kilos of payload in a combination of stealthy internal weapons bays and external hardpoints, including everything from air-to-air and air-to-ground missiles to precision-guided bombs to nuclear warheads. It features an impressive combat range of 870 miles, 1,400 kilometers, when it's taking on aerial adversaries. But out of all of its many features, two are most impressive: its high-level stealth technology and its cutting-edge suite of advanced avionics. Those avionics consist of sensors, targeting systems, onboard computers, data links, and more, meant to give the F-35 and its pilots an unparalleled understanding of the battle space that surrounds them. Alongside the F-35A, Lockheed Martin offers the B variant for short takeoff and vertical landing, and the carrier-based C variant for its advanced naval air wings. Israel boasts its own souped-up custom build of the F-35, designated the F-35I, or the Adir. For Lockheed Martin, the widespread adoption of the F-35 and the long-term need for its capabilities have been a major windfall. The aircraft is expected to serve for the better part of a century with the United States, with a hazy retirement date that's been somewhere around the late 2080s. With other global air forces, it'll probably serve even longer if the continued presence of Cold War-era MiG-21s or F-4s in global arsenals is any indication. For Lockheed Martin, that means that the F-35 is a hell of a nest egg, a program that'll keep on funneling government dollars into the defense contractors' pockets for a very, very long time. But as big of a reassurance as that long-term relationship must be, it's a bright spot at a moment in Lockheed's history that's otherwise looking just a bit bleak. In fact, at the quarter-century mark of the 21st century, the aerospace giant that developed the Hercules, the Raptor, the Nighthawk, the Fighting Falcon, the Galaxy, and even the Blackbird now appears to be falling on hard times. At the heart of Lockheed's troubles is a program that we've covered on this channel before, the NGAD, or Next Generation Air Dominance Initiative. Concocted by the US Air Force in the mid-2010s, the NGAD is America's effort to build the world's first sixth-generation fighter, an aircraft that would represent a massive leap forward in aerospace technology. Unlike 5th generation and earlier fighter aircraft, a 6th generation fighter can only partially be understood as a fighter at all. Instead, it's a real-time combat supercomputer, leveraging new generation stealth, top-of-the-line electronic warfare tools and sensors, artificial intelligence, data fusion technology, unmanned loyal wingmen drones, and a far larger digital battlefield network. Using those tools, the NGAD will basically become the center of a coordinated combat constellation with other aircraft and military assets. The US Air Force hopes to have its new NGAD operational by the early 2030s, while a parallel initiative, the FAXX program through the US Navy, will field a separate 6th-gen fighter at around the same time. And by the way, just our usual disclaimer here about all of this before we continue, there is no universally agreed definition of a 5th or 6th generation fighter aircraft. Yeah, it's an arbitrary term, but considering that we understand what each term describes in a general sense, we're just going to roll with it for today. Okay? Now, for the executives at Lockheed Martin, it might have seemed half a decade ago as if there'd be a shoo-in for the NGAD and the FAXX contracts. After all, Lockheed Martin is the only American aerospace contractor to have built a 5th generation fighter, and it's built 2 of them, operationalizing them for the Air Force, Navy, and combined operations as needed. But after a highly competitive bidding process, Washington decided to go in a different direction for its NGAD program, instead choosing the Boeing company to build an aircraft designated the F-47. Meanwhile, although the company that will build the FAXX aircraft hasn't yet been publicly announced, Lockheed Martin has already been eliminated from the competition, which is now going to be contested between Boeing and Northrop Grumman. With no other contracts for top-of-the-line combat aircraft coming anytime soon, that meant that for the first time in many years, Lockheed Martin doesn't have a single new combat aircraft in development. Alongside those disappointing developments, Lockheed has experienced other setbacks over the last couple of years. Its earning reports have left investors underwhelmed, and it doesn't have very many prospective international customers for the F-35, and it's falling victim to circumstances outside its control as the geopolitical upheaval of America's second Trump administration has left other countries skeptical about buying American defense products. Nor could Lockheed secure contracts for the Air Force's next stealth bomber, the Army's next long-range troop carrier, or the US military's efforts to procure high-volume unmanned systems. Suspected intelligence assets that Lockheed is working on, like the SR-72, aren't a matter of public record, and its other ongoing projects just aren't enough to make up the gap, either conceptually or indeed financially. As Bank of America's lead aerospace and defense investor Ron Epstein explained in early 2025, we'll quote him here, "This begs the question as to what Lockheed Martin's future is as a prime contractor in a 6th-gen fighter world if they are not leading the development of any of the manned 6th-gen programs." Now, of course, all of this isn't to say that Lockheed Martin is in some kind of crisis. It'll have the F-35 program at a minimum for many years to come. But for such a high-powered defense contractor with such an impressive historical record, the company seems to have less momentum today than it's had in many generations. But that is where Lockheed's newest gamble comes into the picture. With no easy way back into America's 6th-generation fighter programs, the aerospace giant has instead begun asking a different question. Just how good could the F-35 platform ultimately be, and how good would Lockheed Martin have to make it in order to convince America and its allies that really they don't even need the NGAD? What if Lockheed Martin could, just for the sake of discussion, provide, say, 80% of the upcoming F-47's capabilities, but at just half the cost? What if instead of all the headaches that are sure to come from a 6th-generation fighter program, America invested in a plane that was 5th generation plus? According to Lockheed Martin's leaders, that is precisely what the company plans to offer in what they call, in reference to America's car racing, the F-35's NASCAR upgrade, or as we'll refer to it for the benefit of a global audience, the SuperLightning. Just before we continue, as always, I'd like to give a big plug for our twice-weekly newsletter, which keeps you much more up-to-date than these videos can. You'll find a link to it below. It's completely free. As I mentioned, it goes out twice a week. I think there's over 10,000 subscribers to that newsletter now, so thank you so much. And why not join them? Like I say, there's a link in the description. And now let's talk about building the SuperLightning. Now, at the core of Lockheed's vision for an upgraded F-35 is a group of assets that the defense giant now has at its disposal, basically just sitting in its back pocket. You see, by the time Lockheed learned that it wouldn't be building the F-47 and that it also wouldn't be building the FAXX, it was deep into the design phase to create the aircraft it would have built for both programs. As a result, the company had already invested time and money into many of the new technologies that it had intended to incorporate to the new aircraft. According to the company's CEO speaking to investors in April of this year, those include new command and control systems, new features to allow advanced aircraft to team up with unmanned platforms, autonomous AI technology, and more. Although the level of maturity of those projects is unknown outside of Lockheed, it stands to reason that at a minimum, the company has started the process of developing a wide range of sixth-generation assets. If the company's plans were proceeding on schedule, then it may be well deep into the testing and development phases for many of those assets. And some of them could actually even be operational already. The thing about highly advanced procurement initiatives like the NGAD is that just because a company's proposals ultimately weren't chosen to go into production, that doesn't mean that they designed a bad aircraft. Sure, the choice of Boeing's F-47 over Lockheed's offering would imply that the F-47 is better in some way, but when comparing two ultra-sophisticated combat platforms, even the less impressive of the two is likely to be head and shoulders above every aircraft from a prior generation. Just take the YF-23, the aircraft that narrowly lost out in the development contest that ultimately produced the F-22 Raptor. Produced by Northrop and McDonnell Douglas, the YF-23 was a fantastic aircraft by all accounts, and many will still argue to this day, including in our own comments section, hello guys, that it should have been chosen over the Raptor. And just like that contest in the early 90s, there are no guarantees that the US government chose Boeing's F-47 proposal because it was demonstrably better than Lockheed's. There are a wide range of reasons why Boeing's design might have been chosen, from the aircraft possibly offering capabilities that were less advanced but more conceptually in line with what the Air Force wanted, to a desire within Washington to make sure that they didn't have to worry about a future collapse of the beleaguered Boeing company. Or the Boeing design might really have been better, but again, even if it was, the odds are that Lockheed's proposal would have made a superb aircraft in its own right. And already, reports are starting to emerge on the details of this proposed SuperLightning, all meant to deliver on that same idea that we mentioned before, that an extensively upgraded F-35 could offer 80% of the capability of a sixth-generation fighter at just 50% of the cost. There are two elements to consider here, capability and then price, but let's start with capability. According to Lockheed Martin execs, this hypothetical SuperLightning would integrate new stealth technologies that were already developed for the NGAD, including radar-absorbent coatings that would offer substantial improvements on the coatings that the F-35 already uses. The aircraft would get a new outer fuselage, particularly with improvements to its engine inlets and outflow nozzles, areas that have to be designed very carefully to keep modern air defense systems from picking up a radar or infrared signature. Stealth aircraft are not necessarily as stealthy when they're viewed from directions other than head-on, and the F-35 in particular is known to be much more observable from the back than it is from the front. When the aircraft was being designed, that wasn't so massive of an issue, but now as highly modern air defense systems communicate with each other and pick up more data from more sensors, it's becoming a major liability. This is a big part of why, already, some aerospace experts refer to the F-35 and the F-22 Raptor as starting to become obsolete as air defenses have caught up to the stealthy design principles of the 90s and 2000s. A redesign in those areas could greatly improve the F-35's viability as a modern platform. Along with improved stealth features, Lockheed execs have indicated that they're going to try and make the F-35 pilot optional, fitting it out with advanced artificial intelligence systems that would allow it to operate autonomously. That work's already in progress, and because the F-35 was designed in a modular way, meaning in a way that allows it to incorporate new software and other technology without needing a full redesign, autonomous capabilities should be able to transfer to F-35s that have already entered service. Lockheed has indicated that it could start fielding pilot-optional F-35s within just a couple of years. Beyond autonomous capabilities, the F-35 could also incorporate new unspecified weapon systems that have purportedly been developed for the F-47 or are in the process of being built. While the nature of those weapons are unknown, they likely include both directed energy weapons, basically lasers, and advanced missiles that are currently in development elsewhere in America's defense industrial complex. The aircraft could get sophisticated new infrared sensors, new data processing hubs, and other new software and hardware elements that would greatly improve the F-35's battlefield awareness and onboard computing power. It could even incorporate new engines, as well as stealthy underwing fuel tanks and pylons that are being developed for the F-22. So, those are the improvements that would purportedly bring the F-35 to within 80% of the capabilities offered by the F-47. It's going to still lose out in some areas like combat range, top speed, and possibly some of its onboard hardware, according to Washington's claims about the F-47's capabilities. But between improved stealth, autonomy, new weapon systems, and pairing with unmanned systems, this SuperLightning would be a clear step above the F-35 that's currently on offer. But just as important is a matter of price, with the claim that a SuperLightning would only be half as expensive as the F-47, mostly coming down to the tough realities of production. To build the F-47, Boeing will have to build expensive prototypes and early production line aircraft, new assembly lines with new equipment, and new sustainment capabilities, which will be critical to ensure that Boeing can maintain the aircraft once it's built. On the other hand, Lockheed has already gone to the trouble of building those assembly lines, doing the hard work of development and early production, and creating a sustainment infrastructure that's proven to be extremely effective. In a practical sense, Lockheed's claim is that it would be far cheaper to simply add some improvements to existing F-35s or adjust the details of the design before producing new ones than it would be to create an entire F-47 program from the ground up. And from the perspective of the US Air Force, that might turn out to be a really tempting offer. Nobody, not even Lockheed Martin, is claiming that the US will just decide never to build a sixth-generation fighter. But asking whether America builds the F-47 is a very different question than asking whether America builds it now. With the exception of the rather miraculously under-budget B-21 Raider, America's efforts to upgrade its military kit are not going smoothly. The effort to develop a new intercontinental ballistic missile has gone far over budget. The F/A-XX program is facing possible cancellation in an attempt to cut costs. The Navy is dealing with gargantuan cost overruns for new classes of submarines and aircraft carrier, and the Trump administration is pushing to create an advanced missile defense system and reinvigorate America's shipbuilding industry. All that money has got to come from somewhere. So if Lockheed can offer Washington a way to avoid spending on the F-47 for a decade or two, that may be a really appealing prospect for the nation's military leaders. As of now, the Pentagon has yet to weigh in on the concept, but across the aerospace defense world, the general consensus is that in theory, Lockheed's new proposal just might work. Can it be done? Will it be done? Of course, as any defense industrial nerd will quite happily tell anyone who listen, there is a massive difference between ideas that work in theory and ideas that work in practice. As we've discussed, there are real reasons to believe that this F-35 approach could be effective. Lockheed has the technology in development, and it offers a cost-cutting solution at the right time for America. But unfortunately for Lockheed Martin, there are also a very long list of reasons to worry that the SuperLightning could either be dead on arrival or outright harmful to US interests. First, the current state of the F-35 program is far from perfect, even before Lockheed commits to major overhauls. The Block 4 version of the fighter has faced significant setbacks, largely due to bugs with its situational awareness system, and while Block 4 should give the jet better processing power, better software, and other cutting-edge improvements, that's taking a really long time to happen. And that doesn't exactly inspire tons of confidence for a proposal that basically consists of making a much higher volume of similar upgrades. Lockheed also faces supply chain issues, particularly its ability to deliver spare parts for the F-35 in hypothetical wartime conditions, considering that keeping its supply chains in order has proven hard enough for the company during peacetime. Beyond its recent trouble, Lockheed has faced criticisms for its handling of the F-35 program for practically the F-35 program's entire existence, including before it even entered service. It's a high-maintenance aircraft that's faced trouble with a number of onboard systems over the years, and although its safety record is impressive on paper, a disproportionate rate of high-profile accidents have influenced its reputation anyway. Add to that a recently revised estimate of the F-35's sustainment cost, now estimated to bring the cost of the entire program to over, wait for it, $2 trillion over its lifetime. In the aircraft, well, it's far from a perfect investment opportunity. Then there's the second question to answer about the current F-35 program that'll be very important to address before a massive additional investment is poured into the platform. That question has to do with the export market. Is the international demand for F-35s expected to pick up, or is the F-35 demand in the process of dropping off entirely? There are solid arguments to make in either direction. On the positive end for Lockheed, Saudi Arabia is interested in getting the F-35, while the aircraft is also on offer to India, where longtime leader Narendra Modi is looking to modernize the country's air force. But in both cases, there are reasons to be skeptical. Allies of the president in Washington and in Israel are expected to try and ensure that Saudi Arabia gets modernized F-16s instead of F-35s, while India is looking as if it's going to try and develop a fifth-gen fighter of its own, while also entertaining a competing offer of Russian Su-57s. Meanwhile, other potential buyers appear unlikely to pull the trigger. Turkey is reportedly somewhat interested, but is hard at work developing its own fifth-gen design, the Khan, while the United Arab Emirates have signaled that they don't intend to get back to pursuing the Lightning after withdrawing from the program under difficult circumstances in 2021. Even longtime US allies are showing a willingness to move away from the platform after growing concerned with the rhetoric coming out of Washington. Both Canada and Portugal are looking to downsize or cancel upcoming procurements. Germany reportedly has reservations about the program, and the Danish official who chose to procure F-35s for his country now has outright admitted that he regrets the decision. Not only are these black marks for the F-35 program in general, but they'd suggest that some nations that already operate the F-35 might not be as interested in an upgraded version as Lockheed would hope. Not only that, but fewer international buyers means less money coming into the program, less profit potential, and less of a willingness to invest in a piece of technology that the global market just isn't interested in procuring. With the F-35 expected to face stiff competition on the export market, from Russia's Su-57 to the Swedish Gripen or French Rafale to Lockheed's own highly modernized F-16s, the more expensive F-35 just isn't guaranteed to come out on top. Yeah, it's more advanced than any of those other aircraft, especially if this SuperLightning upgrade is carried out as described. But even if that hyper-advanced version is allowed to become an export product, other nations may decide to accept a less advanced alternative in exchange for lower costs and the luxury of not having a supremely important defense asset be dependent on America's continued goodwill. And there's also a very real possibility that a program to advance the F-35 would be taken in a different direction, thanks in part to America's commander-in-chief. During his first international trip to several oil-rich nations of the Persian Gulf, Donald Trump proposed that Lockheed Martin build a new stealth fighter, a twin-engine concept based on the F-35, but referred to instead as the F-55. The proposal was met mostly with confusion and surprise by global aviation experts, seeing as there's been practically no prior discussion of a twin-engined F-35 successor, and neither the Air Force, the Navy, or Lockheed Martin seemed to know about this idea beforehand. But with over 3 more years left of the Trump administration and the distinct possibility of a next American government run by a political successor, the Commander-in-Chief's stated priorities can't be ignored. There's a non-zero possibility, even if it's not terribly likely, that the F-35 will be redesigned to a twin-engine aircraft rather than being modernized in its current form. Perhaps most dangerous of all, when it comes to actual warfighting capability, is that the decision to delay the F-47 program could very well leave the United States at a technological disadvantage for decades. The F-47 is far from the only 6th-generation fighter program in the world. China's got its J-36, a joint European consortium has the FCAS, and a 3-way program between the UK, Italy, and Japan has the GCAP, all expected to go operational within the next 10 to 15 years. Delay the F-47 by a decade, and the US could very well put itself into a situation where it's still reliant on high 5th-generation aircraft, while several more advanced platforms are in service across the globe. Nor is that an easy deficiency to deal with once it exists. Much like the continual upgrades to the F-35, those other nations will continue to evolve their new generation aircraft once they're in service, meaning that as the US sprints to catch up, those nations will only be extending their competitive lead. Invest too heavily in a SuperLightning today, and America may place itself at a disadvantage for decades, all for the purpose of saving some costs in the short term. But even with all those potential drawbacks, the fact remains, an overhauled F-35, drawing on Lockheed Martin's lessons learned from the NGAD program, would quickly earn the distinction of being the most advanced global aircraft currently in service, at least until those other new generation designs go operational. If the F-35 can reach a full 80% of the capability promised by the F-47, then the only aircraft to unseat it from a place of dominance will be one of these new jets in development. If the US could figure out how to upgrade a portion of its F-35 fleet without losing the competitive advantage of its F-47 program, and without compromising the financial health of America's broader defense apparatus, then a SuperLightning could be a valuable contribution to the US military. And beyond its fighting value, there are other practical reasons to believe that an F-35 upgrade may be worth the cost. Right now, America's potential to build combat aircraft basically comes down to its big 3 aerospace corporations: Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Boeing. Two of those companies, the two that aren't named Lockheed Martin, have secured the future of their combat aircraft development programs, with the F-47 for Boeing, the B-21 for Northrop, and the F/A-XX expected to go to one of the two. Lockheed Martin, as we've already explained, does not have similar prospects right now, and by nature that creates some risk of atrophy. For a company that's built the world's fastest known manned aircraft, the most dominant air superiority fighter in history, and now manages the most prolific 4th and 5th generation combat aircraft in global arsenals, a loss of development capability would be a severe blow to the US. Not only does America only have 3 major aerospace corporations that can do that sort of work, but despite the F-35's recent troubles, the long arc of aviation history shows that Lockheed is the best of them all. Meanwhile, companies like Anduril or General Atomics haven't yet proved that they could step into a gap that Lockheed Martin were to leave behind, even after they've been chosen to develop a pair of loyal wingman drones designed to fly alongside manned combat aircraft. So perhaps it's not quite right to think of an investment into the SuperLightning exclusively as a tool to fulfill some combat air capability at a cheaper price. Instead, the costs of the program may be better understood as the price America has to pay to ensure that Lockheed Martin doesn't lose its touch simply because it hit a dry spell for its new contracts. If anything should be clear at this point, it's that the decision to proceed with an overhauled F-35 is not going to be an easy one. But at a time when global air capability is rising to match America's, when a new generation of combat aircraft promises to leave their predecessors in the dust, and when the United States is straining to manage the financial burden of superpower status, hard decisions must be made. Perhaps the answer to America's problems is to push forward with new cutting-edge technologies and somehow find a way to deal with the consequences. Or perhaps the answer is the combat jets America made along the way. Either way, only time is gonna tell. Thank you for watching.